morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kevin Call again, Forsac.tv publisher. Now, our president, Trump, these are the 123 good things that he has done over the last 4 years' time. And one, not to many people's satisfaction, was his reaction to the pandemic, but he did his best. How are we as Americans know that Joe Biden would do better than President Trump if Joe Biden was put in the same position during the pandemic? So we have to go with the 123 good things that has happened under his presidency and move on for the continuity of the government, which is very important. Otherwise, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will make America weaker, and China will be owned by China. So, ladies and gentlemen, please keep your eyes open, ears open, and vote accordingly for the November 3rd election. Thank you.
Good morning, America, and good evening, India. This is Megha from Fawcett TV. We all know that the election in US is on its peak. Today, we are here with some of the incident which has been handled by the present US President Donald Trump during his 4 years of tenure. Talking about Washington's attack to manage the current situation of COVID pandemic, the list goes on. Trump has recently signed 3 bills to benefit native people. One gives compensation to the Spokan tribe for loss of their land in the mid-1900s. Another one funds native language program. And the third gives federal recognition to the Little Shell tribes of Chippewa Indians in Montana. Second, Trump finalized the creation of Space Force as our 6th military branch. Trump signed a law to make cruelty to animals a federal felony so that animal abusers face tougher consequences. Violent crime has fallen every year he's been in office after rising during the 2 years before he was elected. Trump signed a bill making CBD and hemp legal. Trump signed the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, which includes the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, which both give law enforcement and victims new tools to fight sex trafficking. Trump signed a bill to require airports to provide space for breastfeeding. 25% lowest paid Americans enjoyed a 4.5% income boost in November 2019, which outpaces a 2.9% gain in earning for the country's highest paid workers. Low-wage workers are benefiting from higher minimum wages and from cooperation that are increasing entry-level. Trump signed the biggest wilderness protection and conservation bill in decade and designed 375,000 acres as protected land. Trump designed the Save Our Seas Act, which funds $10 million per year to clean tons of plastic and garbage from the ocean. He signed a bill this year allowing some drug imports from Canada so that prescription prices would go. Trump signed an executive order this year that forces all healthcare providers to disclose the cost of their services so that Americans can compare, shop, and know how much less providers charge insurance companies. When signing that bill, he said no American should be blindsided by bills for medical services they never agreed to in advance. Hospitals will now require to post their standard charges for services which include the discounted price a hospital is willing to. In the 8 years prior to President Trump's inauguration, prescription drug prices increased by an average of 3.6% per year. Under Trump, drug prices have seen year-over-year decline in 9 of the last 10 months, with a 1.1% drop as of the most recent month. He created a White House VA hotline to help veterans and principally staffed it with veterans and direct family members of veterans. VA employees are being held accountable. Step Act's reform address inequities in sentencing law that disproportionately harmed Black Americans and reform mandatory minimums that created unfair outcomes. First Step Act expands judicial discrimination in sentencing of non-violent crimes. Over 90% of those benefiting from the retroactive sentencing reduction in the First Step Act are Black Americans. First Step Act provides rehabilitative programs to inmates, helping them successfully rejoin society and not return to crime. Trump increased funding for historical Black colleges and universities by more than 14%. Trump signed legislation forgiving Hurricane Katrina debt that threatened HBCUs. New single-family home sales are up 31.6% in October 2019 compared to just 1 year ago. Made HBCUs priority by creating the position of Executive Director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs. Trump received the Bipartisan Justice Award at the historically Black college for his criminal justice reform accomplishment. Poverty rates fell to a 17 years low of 11.8% under the Trump's administration as a result of a jobs-rich environment. Poverty rates for African Americans and Hispanic Americans have reached their lowest levels since the US began collecting such data. President Trump signed a bill that creates 5 national monuments, expands several national parks, adds 1.3 million acres of wilderness, and permanently reauthorizes the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Trump's USDA committed $124 million to rebuild rural water infrastructure. Consumer confidence and small business confidence is at an all-time high. More than 7 million jobs created since election. More Americans are now employed than ever recorded before in our history. More than 4 lakh manufacturing jobs created since his election. Trump appointed 5 openly gay ambassadors. Trump ordered Rick General, his openly gay ambassador to Germany, to lead a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality across the globe. Through Trump's anti-trafficking coordination team initiative, federal law enforcement more than double conviction of human traffickers and increase the number of defendants charged by 75% in active district. In 2018, the Department of Justice dismantled an organization that was the internet's leading source of prostitution-related advertisement resulting in sex trafficking. Trump's OMB published new anti-trafficking guidance for government procurement officials to more effectively combat human trafficking. Trump's Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security investigation arrested 1,588 criminals associated with human trafficking. Trump's Department of Health and Human Services provided funding to support the National Human Trafficking Hotline to identify perpetrators and give. Under his leadership, ISIS has lost most their territory and been largely dismantled. ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed. Signed the first parking CTE reauthorization since 2006, authorizing more than $1 billion for states each year to fund vocational and career education programs. Executive order expanding apprenticeship opportunities for students and workers. Trump issued an executive order prohibiting the U.S. government for discriminating against Christians or punishing expressions of faith. Signed an executive order that allows the government to withhold money from college campuses deemed to be anti-Semitic and who fail to combat anti-Semitism. President Trump ordered a halt to U.S. tax money going to international organizations that fund or perform abortion. Trump imposed sanctions on the socialists in Venezuela who have killed their citizens, finalized new trade agreement with South Korea, made a deal with European Union to increase US energy export to Europe, withdraw the US from the job-killing TPP deal, secured $250 billion in new trade and investment deal in China and $12 billion in Vietnam. The up to $12 billion in aid for farmers affected by unfair trade retaliation has had over a dozen U.S. hostage freed, including those Obama could not get freed. Trump signed the Music Modernization Act, the biggest change to copyright law in decades. Trump secured billions that will fund the buildings of a wall at our southern border. Trump administration is promoting second chance hiring to give former inmates the opportunity to live crime-free lives and find meaningful employment. Trump's DOJ and the Board of Prisons launched a new ready-to-work initiative to help connect employers directly with former prisoners. President Trump's historic tax cut legislation includes new opportunity zone incentives to promote investment in low-income communities across the country. 8,764 communities across the country have been designated as opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are expected to spur $100 billion in long-term private capital investment in economically distressed communities across the country. Trump directed the Education Secretary to end Common Core. Trump signed the 1911 Victims Compensation Fund into law. Trump signed Measure Funding Prevention Program for Veteran Suicide. Companies have bought back over $1 trillion from overseas because of TCJA bill that Trump signed. Manufacturing jobs are growing at fastest rate in more than 30 years. Stock markets has reached record highs. Median household income has hit highest level ever recorded. African American employment is at an all-time low. Hispanic American employment is at all-time low. Asian American employment is at all-time low. Women's unemployment rate is at 65-year low. Youth unemployment is at 50 years low. We have the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded. The pledge to American workers has resulted in employers committing to train more than 4 million Americans. 95% of US manufacturers are optimistic about the future, the highest ever. As a result of Republican tax bill, small businesses will have the lowest top marginal tax rate in more than 80 years. Record number of regulations eliminated that hurt small businesses. Signed welfare reform requiring able-bodied adults who don't have children to work or look for work if they are welfare. Under Trump, the FDA approved more adorable generic drug than ever before in history. Reformed Medicare program to stop hospitals from overcharging low-income seniors on their drug, saving seniors hundreds of millions of dollars this year alone. Signed right to try legislation allowing terminally ill patients to try experimentally treatment that wasn't allowed before. Secured $6 billion in new funding to fight the opioid epidemic. Signed VA Choice Act and VA Accountability Act expanded VA telehealth services, walk-in clinics, and same-day urgent primary and mental health care. US oil production recently reached all-time highs, so we are less dependent on oil from the Middle East. US is a net natural gas exporter for the first time since 1957. NATO alliance increased their defense spending because of this pressure campaign. Withdraw the United States from the job-killing Paris Climate Accord in 2017, and that same year the US still lead the world by having the largest reduction in carbon emission. Has his circuit court judge nominee been confirmed faster than any other new administration has had his Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh confirmed. Moved US Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Agreed to a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada that will increase jobs here, billion coming in. Reached a breakthrough agreement with the EU to increase US export. Imposed tariffs on China in response to China's forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and their Chronicle Abusive Trade Practice has agreed to a Part 1 trade deal with China, signed legislation to improve the National Security Hotline, signed the most comprehensive childhood cancer legislation ever into law, which will advance childhood cancer research and improve treatment. Tax Cuts and Jobs Act signed into law by Trump doubled the maximum amount of the child tax credit available to parents and lifted the income limit so more people could claim it. It also created a new tax credit for other dependents. In 2018, President Trump signed into law a $2.4 billion funding increase for the Child Care and Development Fund, providing a total of $8.1 billion to state to fund child care for low-income families. Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit signed into law by Trump provides a tax credit equal to 20 to 35% of child care expenses, that is $3,000 per child and $6,000 per families, plus flexible spending accounts allow you to set aside up to $5,000 in per tax dollar to use for child care. In 2019, President Donald Trump signed the Austin Collaboration, Accountability, Research, Education and Support Act into law, which allocate $1.8 billion in funding over the next 5 years to help people with autism spectrum disorder and to help their families. In 2019, Donald Trump signed into law to funding packages providing nearly $19 million in new funding for lupus-specific research and education program, as well an additional $41.7 billion in funding for National Institutes of Health, the most lupus funding ever. Another upcoming accomplishment to add. In the next week or two, Trump will signing the first major anti-robocall law in decades called TRACED Act, that is Telephone Robocall Abuse Criminal Enforcement and Deterrence. Once it's the law, the TRACED Act will extend the period of time the FCC has to catch and punish those who initially break telemarketing restriction. The bill also requires voice service providers to develop a framework to verify calls are legitimate before they reach your phone. US stock market continuously hit all-time record high because so many people ask for a document.